fantasy football is about to kick off in a way that it hasn't ever done before. The excitement is at a fever pitch, and your excitement should be too, because this year we have Fantasy Vibes breaking you down everything that you need to know in the fantasy football world, including waiver wire. The waiver wire looks bountiful. There's other weeks where the waiver wire doesn't look as deep, and we have to take advantage of that being in week one. It's going to be my job to help you understand what is value. When is it time to strike on that value? When is it time to just watch? Or when is it time for you just to fade a player because he's not ready to bust just yet, whether it's market value, matchup? So I'm your host, MoonVibes, and we're going to be breaking down this on Fantasy Vibes. Stay tuned. This is Ride This Wave. Coming up first, we're going to talk about a bunch of quarterbacks that need to be rostered. Under 55% rostered in all leagues. Tua Tagovailoa, 53%. Justin Fields, 51%. Trey Lance, 34%. Jameis Winston, 32%. And Sam Darnold, 3%. Those are quarterbacks that you need to be interested in for this season, and you need to be interested in week one. Jameis Winston takes on a matchup against the New Orleans Green Bay Packers, and the over-under for that game is kind of on the high end of the margin for this week. Jameis Winston very well could be a top 12 quarterback this year, especially when Michael Thomas comes back. But until then, they're going to need a player that I'm going to mention a little bit later, a little bit of foreshadowing. But Jameis Winston is a player that I'm interested in. Tua Tagovailoa, we're going to see the Miami Dolphins add more to his plate this year. He's a player that I'm looking at that's going to be there. Trey Lance and Justin Fields, they're going to be the hottest tickets in the fantasy football player pool. How much of a bummer will it be for your league mates when they realize that you already took Trey Lance or you already took Justin Fields before they could even have the chance to do so? Why? Because you were ahead of the curve and you said to yourself, hey, let me pick up this value and add them to my bench before anybody else can. That's going to be the goal of this. But let's get into these waiver wire ads after I got these quarterbacks out of the way. Coming up first, Gerald Everett of the Seattle Seahawks. He was stuffed behind the depth chart behind Tyler Higbee last season and, well, really last couple of seasons in the Rams offense. And a lot of people didn't really understand the worth of Gerald Everett. Now we get a chance to see that. He's playing with Russell Wilson this year, and Russell Wilson has a history of going to tight ends often, very often. Last year, Russell Wilson threw 27% of his red zone passes to tight ends and 25% of his career of red zone passes to tight ends. That gives Everett the chance to enter into tight end one conversation, finishing his tight ends 1 through 12 this season with just touchdown upside alone. Coming up next, Marquez Callaway, who's 38% rostered in your leagues. He bust onto the scene in preseason in a way that we wasn't really anticipating, especially with Michael Thomas not being there, Tre'Quan Smith getting hurt. There was a lot of things that went into it. But the first game he had 4 targets. He was targeted 4 times, catching 3 of them for 61 yards. But the real excitement came in the week after when Jameis Winston got the starting nod at quarterback. And Marquez Callaway had 5 catches for 104 yards and 2 scores. He showed that he can be a legit deep threat, and he can show that he can be a security blanket for Jameis Winston in this offense. Zach Ertz, 33% right now in leagues. All the talk throughout the offseason was Zach Ertz. Hey, what are you going to be doing? What are you going to contribute to my roster? When are you going to get traded? He didn't get traded. And he still has a chance to contribute to your roster because why? Zach Ertz is only 30 years old, and if you remove last year, he still finishes the top 6 tight end in fantasy in the past 4 seasons besides 2020. So I definitely look at Zach Ertz as a player that I'm keeping my eye on this week and see what he does. Coming up next, Jacoby Myers. 8 of 9 targets in this preseason came from Cam Newton for Jacoby Myers. He put up a relatively nice stat line. He had 9 targets, catching 5 for 73 yards and a touchdown. Let's just be honest. Nelson Aguilar is probably going to be the top option in this wide receiver core for the Patriots offense. That could very much run the ball a lot. However, you still want to have Jacoby Myers on your radar because why? Only being 10% rostered? I'm in Ross St. Brown, who's 10% rostered for the Detroit Lions. He has been one of my favorite deep league sleepers throughout this season. St. Brown fell to the 4th round in the NFL draft and landed in a great spot in Detroit. I think the fantasy football gods loved it. The Lions have one of the weaker receiving cores in National Football League with Tyrell Williams, Khalif Raymond, and Quintez Cephas. Terrace Marshall Jr. I say this all the time when it comes to rookie tight ends. I say this all the time. Rookie tight ends, wide receivers, running backs. As soon as you see that spark, as soon as you see that moment where you say, hey, dang, they had a splash game, a spark game, that is when you add them to your roster. Do not wait. As soon as you see that breakout performance, do it. And we have a potential to see that breakout performance this week. New York Jets, who have one of the youngest secondaries in the entire league, and Terrace Marshall, let's just say I have a feeling he might have a field day. If he starts balling out, why not take advantage of that ahead of time? If you're in a deep, deep league, then 0.3% rostered is Nico Collins. The Texans are not an offensive team that you want to invest in fantasy. However, if you're in Dynasty or if you're in Keepers, you want to look at somebody you can add to your taxi squad or somebody that you can just depend on your bench. Look no further than the Houston Texans wide receiver Nico Collins, who the Texans, they cut Darren Fells, who was a known red zone presence for them last year. Collins is 6'4", 215, and who specializes as a red zone target, and Tyrod Taylor needs somebody to convert points to this season. You can very much see a situation where Nico Collins' value is only in 0.3% of leagues right now, and it shoots up as we get throughout the course of the season. Those are just some names in the wide receiver core that you need. Defenses to look forward to on the waiver wire this year. If you missed out on top defenses like the Rams, the Steelers, the Bucks, the Ravens, the 49ers, the Dolphins, you should go the steaming route and look no further than Denver Broncos at the New York Giants this week. That's going to be an interesting spot in a matchup. Seattle Seahawks at Indianapolis. I know Seattle Seahawks off defense looks kind of bad from last year. However, you don't want to miss an opportunity to stream, because we're not talking about season long right now. We're talking about micro. We're talking about week 1. That's a great matchup with Indianapolis. Minnesota Vikings, who on paper, I've been seeing a lot of reports that the Vikings might have a better defense this year, at least in the top 10 in most statistical categories. We'll have to wait to see if that happens and plays out. But the first game, Joe Burrow's first game from ACL injury, why not have them out there as a starting defense for you if you missed out on one of those big name defenses like the Ravens, Steelers, 49ers, or the Rams? Other deeper league options that you need to take consideration are Cole Kmet, tight end for the Bears, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and also Rashard Higgins for the Cleveland Browns wide receivers, KJ Hamler for the Denver Broncos wide receiver, Kenneth Gainwell for the running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, who is going to be in a situation where Nick Sirianni is going to use multiple backs, so his value is only going to increase as the season goes on. Quez Watkins, wide receiver of the Philadelphia Eagles. Tony Jones Jr., who's solidified into that number 2 role behind Alvin Kamara in New Orleans. Juwan Johnson, another tight end for the New Orleans Saints as well, that needs to be added. And those are just some of the deeper league options for you to get busy with in this season. For me, MoonVibes, I'm signing out. This is Fantasy Vibes, presented by Real Ones Productions.